let's really quick look at the Wikipedia article on unidirectional data flow. Just to
Coming to you from Charlottesville, Virginia, Willow Talk, with your hosts, Andrew Carter and Ben Fry.
Okay, Ben.
How's it going, Andrew?
It's going good, man. I haven't seen you like in 2 months. How have you been?
It's been a while.
Well,
I've been well.
You've been well, good.
What do you got for us today?
Today I've got this thing, unidirectional data flow.
That's the new hotness.
It's very much the new hotness.
Everybody's into this.
So everybody on the web team is using React and Redux, and it's starting to spill over into the Android and iOS teams as well. Mm-hmm. I was sort of like hesitant at first because I'm pretty strict with whatever, like, you know, if Apple made the platform and Apple says MVC, that's what you're going to use.
Yeah, and this is an architecture that's not really first party.
Right.
You gotta lay a little bit of foundation.
Yeah. So I was like, I've always kind of like, even things like the reactive ones like ReSwift or Reactive Cocoa, where it's like this big piece of middleware that kind of sits in your application and your whole application depends on it. So I was kind of hesitant at first, and then I started sneaking in a little bit of stuff without using any third-party things just to see if I liked how the structure of the application will work using unidirectional data flow, and I loved it. I was like, this is cool. So I put it in like 2 or 3 spots in my app, and then I started like, I would get bugs in other parts of my app and be like, man, this would be so much easier to debug.
Only this was the same.
So I eventually, actually over Christmas break, on vacation, I spent like a good, I was up till 3 a.m. just like rewriting part of my app for work because I was so into it. So I've landed with ReSwift. Again, because we're iOS.
So you are using ReSwift.
I'm using ReSwift, and so the pattern works on Android, web. I mean, you can basically use the pattern anywhere. Again, Redux is the popular one with the web developers. Mm-hmm. There's something. Actually, one of our guys here at Willow Tree for Android made that John's using. It's Evan made it. I can't remember what his framework is called, but. You don't even really need a framework because the concept itself is pretty simple, but having that framework is nice because then you can all kind of speak the same language, they can all kind of follow the same ideals. But
just do a lot of the boilerplate
right,
for you.
It gives you a boilerplate for you.
Yeah.
So if you're interested in getting this in one of your applications, you don't need to go all in and include a framework yet. You can just kind of test the waters with your own sort of thing that you put together, and if you like it, you can bring it something more official.
Which is exactly how you did it.
Right, and it worked out. So let me show you this app really quick. So most of the examples that the unidirectional data flow frameworks give you are like, here's an incrementer where there's like a plus and minus button. It makes a number go up. But the problem is that when you're making real apps, it's a little bit more complicated than just making a number on a screen get bigger or smaller.
Well, and the basic concept is a flow of data through the app, so just using a little counter doesn't really give you a good idea of that whole structure.
It's a pretty simple use case. Yeah. And I guess let's back up a second. So the idea with unidirectional data flow, we have some guys here at work that are very much into like the heart and what it means and the philosophy behind it, and I'm still learning about that myself, and I'm hoping we can have a guy on here eventually that knows a lot about it. Yeah. But basically, you have
his own library.
Right, he has written his own library. Yeah. We should have him talk about that.
Yeah, that would be good.
So the kind of idea behind it is that you have these. Your whole app can be. I don't know how to say it. So it's like your app has a state. You have actions you can perform on the state, and when you perform actions in the state then notifies subscribers that, hey, here's what happened. And so everything becomes very, very reasonable. There's a very obvious life cycle of you have your app, you do a thing to your app that generates a new version of your state that reflects the changes, and it makes it way easier to debug. It's obvious where things go. It's very, very, very testable because your state management and your things that you can do don't really depend upon the UI.
Yep.
So it's very easy to muck. So if you want to see like what happens if we get back invalid data for my view controller, you can separate the idea of who cares about the view controller. It's more of, hey, state, we just loaded this data and the state burps out, here's what that means.
Yeah.
So you can test this stuff without having actual network calls, without having actual UI, without having actual input. Very testable, very debuggable. It's kind of...
So that's the two ends of the state there, right? It's like you've got the state that you really want to test, but then you have your interactions with networking or database or whatever on one side, and then the other side is actually painting the stuff on the screen, which makes that a lot easier to mock.
So we've been trying to find ways to do view testing or UI testing here for a long time, and it's very, very difficult to do. But if you kind of separate the idea of if your UI is very much just bound to the state of your app, you don't really need to test the UI as much as you test the state, and then if there's bugs, your human QA can do much easier. Just, hey, I noticed this is wrong, then you just go check your data flow stuff. So looking at this application right now, I've done it very it's a simple little app. It's a Reddit app. We can type in a subreddit, like let's do all, press enter. You see a little loader happens right there. If we do an invalid subreddit, we'll get an error. So you'll see there's just a generic error that I've given in my little parser. You can tap on things and you can look at things. That works. There's the whole app.
Spaces, man.
Spaces are bad. So this is using your standard MVC. So if you just let's look at the app real quick and just get an understanding of how it works. Again, if you're not an iOS developer, the core concepts here are the same. Just ignore the iOS specific pieces. So our application's got our search bar. It's got a table. It's got a status view that contains our little spinner and our error message label. So that's our UI components. The view controller itself, again, very simple. We're just using your basic table view. The table view cells we're using are just, if I can find it, it's just the built-in UI table view cell. We're just going to use the text label property that's built in. We're just setting the post to be the text is the title of the post. I've built this API for us where we can get posts for a given subreddit. And again, right now what's having to happen is, this is kind of where you'll start to see the unidirectional stuff be good. So inside of get posts, I've decided, okay, when we go to get posts from the network, we're going to unhide the status view, we're going to unhide the activity indicator, we're going to hide the status label, we're going to reset the post, we're going to reload our data, then we're going to go ahead and make our API call to get the posts. Once we're done, we need to actually handle getting the posts. If we're successful, we need to hide our status view and reload our table's data. If we're a failure, we need to make sure our status error labels and views are unhidden and then set the text. And so this all works right now. And again, this is a very simple app.
But you've got your view and network and logic all really intermingled here. It's going to be difficult to test this.
Sure, it's hard to test. It's hard to debug. If a new developer comes to work on this in like a month, he's going to wonder, like, whose job is it to hide this stuff? Like, maybe they decided to hide those error things inside of get posts. Maybe they decided to handle it inside of here. Maybe there's 6 other view controllers in this application, and everyone that worked on it's kind of done it their own little way. And so you get this problem
difficult to track down where a thing is happening.
Sure, and you can. I'm sure you've all experienced this with the whole massive view controller pattern, where I'm hiding it here, but I'm also hiding it a different way over here, and then this guy decided to hide it over here, and it becomes there's no hard and fast rule of where to put certain kinds of logic. Yeah. And so people have, there's MVVM, there's MVC, there's the presenter, the MVP pattern. So everyone's kind of got their own ways of doing that. Well, the unidirectional data flow is just yet another way of, handling this, but I've kind of fallen pretty hard for it. So let's take this application and make it be unidirectional.
To that point.
Sure. Yeah. So again, we're using ReSwift. You don't have to, but that's what we're going to use here. The nice thing is, with most of the time when you're working on iOS apps, and I assume Android and web too, you kind of jump right in, you think about it for a second, you start making UI, most of your state lives in the UI, and you just start putting things together. Yeah. With unidirectional data flow, if you're starting with that pattern from the get-go, it makes you think about all the state that your app needs to have and all the things you can do ahead of time. So it's kind of funny where whenever I'm making new views of this pattern, I'll be doing a lot of thinking and a lot of code for hours and hours. You can't see anything on the screen yet. And then once I finally plug stuff into the screen, it all just works the first time because you've got this nice compiled time, everything thought out. Yeah. Everything's just there and ready to go. And then really what I've got to do is write this very small glue layer to turn it into what the UI has. So let's look at this app. The state in this app is actually pretty simple. We have some posts, we have some text up here in the text field, and really that's it. Some people will put their navigation state inside of the unidirectional data flow. Or the store is the thing that holds the state. So some people put navigation inside the store as well. Store then? So the store is the guy who is responsible for holding on to the state of the application. Right. And when you do something to the state, you tell the store to dispatch an action to it, and then the store is responsible for then using a reducer the reducer accepts the current state, the action, and then sends out a new state, which is then broadcast to the rest of the application. Okay. And again, just hearing that probably means nothing to anybody, which is why we're going to actually do it, and that'll make a lot more sense. So let's first think about, again, the state. So it's two things. We have posts, and we have some text up here.
Would your error message be part of that?
The error message. So the error message is going to be part of. Oh, let me show you. So we're going to kind of wrap up the post. We're going to wrap the post in an object that handles the error message as well. Another thing that I'm going to do is when I'm making my store and my state and my actions, I try to keep it I try to make it detached from what the UI is. So if there are things like whether or not that activity indicator should be spinning,
Right.
I don't make that part of my state. That's kind of derived from the state. So we're going to use a view model for that too. So the view model kind of takes care of translating what state means to talk to and bind to the UI, but we'll get there. So let's go ahead and make a state. So we're going to call this app state. And again, this is a pretty simple app that only has one state object. If you're using more, if you're using this for your whole application, there's multiple views, you have substates. So you might have app state, you might have detail state, you might have like account state, and then post state or history state or whatever. And just so you can have sub-reducers and sub-states. And it can get pretty complicated. And some people think that the whole like giant ball of state that represents your whole app is very, very bad. But if you think about it, your app already has a giant ball of global state, and it's just represented by the UI, right? So the state of like, if you ask the search bar what his text is, and if you ask this cell what his post is, all the states there, it's just kind of all over the place. Yeah. So in this case, all the states there, it's just in one happy little spot, right? So it's more manageable. So we're gonna make this be a struct. With ReSwift in particular, it doesn't matter the actual data type of your state, so long as it conforms to the state protocol, which is essentially a tag protocol. It doesn't really do anything. So we'll call this app state. Let's go ahead and import our buddy ReSwift. He's going to be a state type. All right, and again, if we look at state type, it's just a marker protocol. Okay. You can like extend this to add cool functionality to it and do more fun things. You can require certain types of state, but the kind of vanilla implementation is it just making sure you're using something that is a state. Okay. So again, we're going to have the text inside of our search bar, and again, I want to decouple this from the UI. So I'm not going to call it like search bar text. I'm going to call it subreddit. Before we type something in there, there's nothing, so we are going to make it optional. So our subreddit is going to be part of our application state, and it's an optional string. The other state, again, is those posts. So let's think of the posts. The posts, when you first enter the application, aren't there. Right. At some point, they become, we're loading them. Once you do load them, they are loaded into there, or maybe they failed for some reason, like there was a network error, or you had a bad query, there's an error. So I'm going to use a few types to wrap this up. So our posts are going to be a loading type of an array of posts, and the initial state is going to be not asked. So our post type is wrapped up in loading, which lets us be either not asked yet, loading, loaded, or error.
And those are basically the different states for that view, that list view there. What it could either be not asked yet, loading.
So the nice thing is we're able to derive, if we're loading, we can show the spinner. If we're loaded, we can show the posts. If we're error, we can show the error. And so it's cool that we're able to kind of like wrap up this idea of what it means to load posts from the network inside of one variable instead of having to split it up in like, is post loading, is post error, have we load, it's one little pipe that does all this.
The power of enums and Swift.
So good. And lots of these tricks, one of my web buddies is into Elm. And so like lots of these, like that not asked pattern kind of thing came from that. Okay. Same thing, you're going to see us use this result type here in a little bit too. I stole that from my web friends also. So there's our state.
Apple's going to give us a result type.
I hope so. I hope we get a first party result. Yeah, everyone's using it, and it's so useful. So we thought about the different things we need to represent our state. Now we need to think about what we can do in our application. Those are actions. So we're going to make a new file. I'm going to call it app action. And the reason I'm kind of namespacing the state and the actions are, again, you could have multiple states, multiple actions. And when we get to the part where our reducer needs to handle what it means to accept a certain kind of action, if you've namespaced them, it's cool. You can say, like, the detail reducer can say, is this a detail action? No, let's just continue on our way, right? So it just makes it quicker, doesn't have to consider all those different things. So we're going to have a enum, and he's going to be an app action, and he's going to be a ReSwift action. And I do believe action is another one of those types that doesn't mean anything. It's just a tag. And again, they've got some built-in ones. They've called this one standard action, and it has some stuff where you can like make a pretty representation of it and like show like a cool playback timeline kind of thing. But again, you can extend it or make your own action types to do whatever your use case is. In our case, we're just going to use the vanilla ones. So let's think about this. What all can we do in our application?
So we can search.
We can search.
We can click on an article.
We can click on an article. We can.
Do you have pull to refresh in here?
We don't have pull to refresh. Okay. We can type
Type. Yeah.
So let's do that then. So let's say one thing we can do is type. So let's call that a action of update subreddit.
Yep.
All right, and optional string. So as the user is typing, we're going to send to the store, we're going to dispatch the action update subreddit with the contents of that search bar.
Okay.
And again, the cool thing is, you might think it's kind of goofy to like keep track of every key press, but the neat thing is we can recreate whatever app state we want from anything, because the same deal, if I want to like refresh this app from the background or restore from an old state, I can, because the subreddit lives in the state, I can make sure that the search bar has the correct text in it because I've kept track of it the whole time.
Yeah.
So it seems kind of overkill, but you'll start seeing real quick where the benefits of that are. And another thing to keep in mind is, again, this is a simple one-screen app. If you had a multi-screen app, you generally will unsubscribe from notifications as you leave views and resubscribe when you come back. So don't worry about having like 20 views all listening to every single action happening. You can kind of,
manage that.
Right, you can manage that. So we can update our subreddit. We can load posts, right?
Oh yeah, load all the posts.
So when you load posts, so asynchronous things with this Redux kind of pattern are interesting. So one action is we want to load posts. The next action is to handle us having loaded the posts. Okay. So you don't want your store or your state doing API interactions. You don't want them like talking to databases. You kind of want like in our case, the view controller is going to take care of doing the API calls, and then they just kind of they don't make decisions with what happened. Mm-hmm. They just say, here's what happened, store, and the store decides what happens. Mm-hmm. Or technically the reducer decides what happens, so we'll get there. So we'll have a handle load post result, mm-hmm. and we're going to pass in the result, which is going to be an array of posts. So again, here's that, if I learn how to type here, here's that result loading.
Is that right?
No, it's not right. There we go. So here's that result type I talked about. Again, this is just simply a success or a failure. In the case of success, we're going to have some posts. In the case of failure,
there's an error.
So
nice.
I think that's all we're going to need for now. Subreddit. Okay. Yeah. Cool. So I think we're good. So those are things we can do. So now we have the state we need. We have the things we need to be able to do in our app. Now we need the thing that can handle, given an action, what do we do?
Is clicking on a post?
Clicking on a post, so it could be an action, but because we're just simply dumping out the Safari controller and we're not tracking our state, we're not going to bother. Okay. You could have
affecting your state in-app too much.
Right. So some people will put more navigation. So the benefit of, if we decided to put inside of our state, like selected posts, for example, yep. The cool thing would be we could launch the app from nothing to, bam, you're in the Safari view controller looking at the posts. Mm-hmm. But once you start getting navigation caught up into your application state, it gets complicated. Because what does it mean to have a tab bar controller with a selected tab with a navigation controller, drill free down? So you can do it. Mm-hmm. It just gets very, very tough. So the way I've been doing it is kind of the same thing with the API. We more inform the store what happened as far as navigation goes, instead of letting it do it itself.
Okay.
So, and the nice thing is, in this simple crafted app I've done here, we get to ignore that scenario. But there are so ReSwift even has a first party extension that handles navigation. Okay. Our buddy here that has his own kind of Redux implementation does do all of his navigation side of it as well. So I think if we can get him on here, he can talk about more how he handles it, because he's got it solved. Cool. It's cool, but I'm not that bought into it yet.
I got you.
We'll see. Okay, we've got our state, we have our actions. Who decides what it means when you do an action to the state? That's the reducer. So let's make our app reducer. Now the reducer does have some stuff it has to do. So we'll make a reducer, we'll call it the app reducer. He's going to be a reducer. So let's take a look at reducer. Ignoring the kind of fancy work he's doing here, the short bit of it is the reducer needs to be able to accept an action and the state, and then return a new state. Again, this is kind of the magic. Given the current state of the application, given a thing you can do in the application, what does that mean, right? So
this is where your real logic is probably going to live.
Right, so this is where the business logic ends up living in your application. So here's the cool part. Most of the time when you have a bug with this, when you're using unidirectional data flow, it's going to live in here. Mm-hmm. So when QA comes back and says, hey, when I search for the subreddit A space W, something weird happened, you go to the action update subreddit and you go to the reducer that decides what it means, then there's your error likely.
And back to the testing thing, this is super testable because you can take any state that you want at any point in the app. You don't have to go through some series to get there.
Right.
You can just take that step and test this
And
with one action.
it does not matter of the UI.
Yeah.
You can, in your unit test, you don't need to launch the simulator or any of that. You can make up a state, get it exactly where you want it, make up an action, make sure it works.
Cool.
It's awesome. So this type, in our case, we have app state and we have app state. Okay, let's make sure this compiles. Cool. So we're going to say that we're going to make a mutable copy of our state. We'll say it's equal to either. So if the initial state of the app may be nil, this is ReSwift specific, where the initial state is either nil or you can provide it a state. With Redux, I'm not sure how they do it with the web bits, but in our case, we're going to say the state is equal to the state if we have it. If we don't have a state, we're just going to make a initial state.
Okay.
And again, the initial state, because all of our things have initial values, the initial state is we haven't loaded anything and we don't have any subreddits. Cool. And then we're going to return the state. So here's where we need to decide what this means. Yeah. So we're going to switch over the action. So we're going to switch on action. Again, in our case, if we had multiple substates, multiple kinds of actions, we want to make sure we only handle the one we care about.
So that's what I was going to say here is,
So app action.
And
so
basically then if you get an action of any other kind, you're just going to ignore it.
Right.
And return
So
the same state.
We'll do break. So we're going to try to cast action to be the action that this reducer cares about. If the cast resulted in no, this didn't work, we're just going to break and return the state. We don't need to do anything to it. So now we have to handle our cases. So we've got 3 of them here. I'm going to copy and paste to save myself Swift's amazing auto completion. So we either have update subreddit.
You gonna call that string? Come on, man.
Oh man. Okay. All right, we have load post, and we have handle load post result. And again, if your language doesn't, like Java doesn't have enums of associated data, so you're not going to use enums, you're going to use structs.
Right.
It doesn't matter what an action is. An action could be a string. An action could be an integer. An action could be some NS data. It doesn't matter, right? As long as it.
You're representing it.
Right. It's all up to you. So what does it mean when you call the action update subreddit? Well, that's an easy one. We're going to take our subreddit and set it equal to the new subreddit. Makes sense. What does it mean when you call load post? Well, now our post state is loading. Makes sense, right?
Okay.
What does it mean when we get back some results? Well, let's take a look. And so we're going to switch over the results. So we have 2 different cases with result. It could be either a failure or it could be a success. So in the case of success, the state's posts are loaded.
And
in the case of failure, the state's posts are an error with the error. And if I typed this all correctly, it should compile. Oh, I need to go back to my state and change these to vars. Cool. Okay, so now we're able to represent our state. We're able to do things, and we're able to decide what those things mean when you do them, right? So the next piece, so we have the state, the actions, the reducers. Now we need the store. And again, the store's job is to hold on to the current state, to accept actions, and then to call the reducers with the state and the action to produce the new state. Again, that's a lot of words. Let's see what that actually looks like in the app. So we've been doing dependency injection, aka initializers, with the store. So you generally would make the store in your root view controller or app delegate, and then kind of baton pass that throughout the rest of the application. So there's no singleton. It's very easy to put in a new type of store or new type of state or whatever. So in our case,
again, that makes it more testable.
Right, it's crazy testable.
Than having to do the singleton.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in our little simple example, we're just going to put it right here in the view controller. So we'll say our store is equal to a store, and the store cares about its generic on the state type, and you have to give it the reducer. Let's import ReSwift so we get some nice autocomplete. Help me out, buddy.
One of these.
I'm asking for too much. Hang on.
Yeah.
Reducer state. Okay. So the reducer is going to be the app reducer, and the state is going to be nil. I think that's what it wants. Look at that. Okay.
And that's because you're starting out with an empty
right,
state.
so the state's empty. And again, the reducer is going to decide, oh, it's empty, let's go ahead and make a new one. Now, if you were sneaky there, install that middleware property. So another thing that I'm not doing is this middleware. So the middleware lives in between, like when the store goes to dispatch an action to the state, it has an opportunity to kind of like run this middleware. And the current like cool use case of that for me is I want to put analytics inside of there. So if I call like get posts on Reddit, I can in the middleware look and see, oh, the action is get posts with these parameters. I can then call my analytics framework to say this happened. So you can keep that gross analytics code out of your app and put it in the middleware. You can also use it for like maybe breadcrumbs, or you could use it for logging to the console, or whatever. There's a bunch of really neat uses for it. In our case, we're going to have no middleware.
Maybe like saving off the state for if your app crashed.
Right, that could be cool. Yeah, you could have to sort of write the disk area once in a while, sort of thing. There's lots of really neat middleware kind of things you can do. I haven't really gotten into that too much yet. I'm excited in my current app to get to analytics and see how that works out. I do think I'm ended up with some analytics-specific actions, which I think is also kind of cool. So instead of having that gross, like, omniture, herpity-burp with channel this, whatever, have a nice, like, track this action, and then it can just, in the middleware, figure out what that means.
Nice.
Nice. So we have our store.
Got a reducer.
So again, the store, we can dispatch, here it is, right? We can dispatch actions, action creators, which are something we'll get to here in a little bit, async action creators. But basically, like, if we wanted to set the subreddit, we could dispatch the what did I call it? App action dot update subreddit to test. So that would, that would.
As soon as it loads, it'll load the test.
Right. So once our app is hooked up, we could do this.
Yeah.
And what would happen is the store would give this action to the reducer, who would then see the current state, set the current state's subreddit to test, and then the part we need to do next is notify who cares about it that it changed. So let's do that part. So to be notified, we need to be a store subscriber. So a store subscriber is a thing that can receive new state, right? So let's go ahead and add that method. Store subscriber.
There you go.
Okay, so new state, and this is going to be generic. So I'm going to get ahead of myself real quick. Well, let's get there in a second. So app state. So in order to subscribe, what we'll do is when this view appears, so view will appear, super view will appear, we're going to say, hey store, I want to be subscribed to you. And we'll get to this fancy selector thing here in a second. And then on view did disappear, we will unsubscribe.
Animated room.
Heck. Okay.
So this isn't unlike signing up as an observer.
Right, sure. So if you're not around, if you're not on screen, you don't really need to see it. So as long as you inside of will appear, you can get yourself back ready. Because what the store is going to do is when you subscribe, it will immediately send the state to you. So you have a chance to get yourself all caught up before you show up. And again, when you disappear, you don't want to have every view in the whole app constantly updating itself if it doesn't need to. So you just unsubscribe to it. So I mentioned earlier that we don't want to put view state inside of the actual application state there. So we can come down here and decide the new state function and say, oh, okay, if the states post are loading, then that means that the activity indicator is going to be hidden or whatever, and so go on, if this. So that's how I was doing it at first. If it's a simple view, it's fine. Once it gets pretty big, you end up with this really big, huge, gross,
back to
basically
the massive view controller
right. So
problem.
what you're doing is you're having to do all this logic to turn. What does it mean to have this state with this view? So
this is where a view model
check this. This is where the view model
handy.
comes in. So there's this really, really handy thing you can do with the subscribe function. So when we subscribe, help me out, buddy. When we subscribe, we have this selector we can optionally do. So what we can do is only take out the part of the state we cared about. So for example, if we only cared about the posts, we could just have this return state dot, what do I call it, posts, and that would give us back this function here. Now instead of getting back app state, would just get back the posts.
Okay.
So what we can do is be a little bit fancy, and inside of this function right here, again, we're able to just basically select the part of the state we cared about. So like in a multi-state app, your detail controller doesn't care about what the account controller is doing, so you could just return the account part of or the detail, whatever part of the state. In our case, we can not only do that, but turn it into something that we like exactly want to use specifically. So let's use a view model for that. And we've been debating whether the word like is view model the right word here. I don't know. I think view model makes sense.
Yeah.
But if you've got a better name, do let me know. So the view model is going to be what holds the properties of exactly what our app cares about. And it's going to simply have one initializer where it takes in the app state. So basically, he's going to receive the application state and then set himself up to give us, the view controller, what we want to display.
Okay.
So again, using some fancy Swift stuff here, that means that this function right here, let's get it so it helps me out again. So the selector is going to be our view model's initializer. So take a second to think about that. Right. So
I see.
Yep.
It'll pass in the
I typed something wrong
state
somewhere.
into the view models init.
And what did I mess up?
It's not expecting an app state, possibly, right?
Convert value app state view model. Oh, right. So it's being fancy because it knows what's happening down here. So these two have to match. There we go. Okay, because with the generics, it can understand that. So it's going to give us a chance to turn the state into. We can select the part we want. We're going to do one better and turn it into a view model specific to this view.
I guess why would you have a state? So you're trying not to couple the state to the view, right? And that's the idea here. So that I guess then you could have a state for the overall section you're in, and maybe for the individual views below, you'd have separate view models.
Right. It could be that. It could be maybe you have an iPad, iPhone app where you want to have the same state but display it differently. There's some value in if you're like doing some cross-platform work. Like if my Android friend and I want to kind of we can't use the exact same code, but if we can speak the same language as far as state goes and then transform it into what we care about later, that makes sense. Or if you're using like a Xamarin kind of thing, maybe there's different state for the Android land versus the Windows land versus the iPhone land. And just so let's take a look at this view model and think about this for a second. So there's actually a good bit of stuff we need to display here, right? So we have that error message, right? And he's got to sometimes have an error message in him. So we have we'll call it a status message. So that's an optional string. We have whether or not that status message is that label is hidden or not. We have whether or not that activity indicator, double spinner, is he hidden or not. Then we have that overlay that contains those two things. So we'll call it the status view. We have whether he's hidden or not. I'm leaving out the word hidden. Then we have the posts. We care about the posts, right?
Yep.
I think that might be it. Let's think about it. So we have the status. Oh, we have the search bar text string. So let's think about it. We have the search bar text. We have the posts. We have the status guys hidden. I think that's everything. Yeah. Okay. So and again, we're able to use a lot more. So the language inside the view model is much more specific than the state. So we're using the word search bar text instead of subreddit there. Right. We're using the post doesn't have to be wrapped in that loading thing because we can turn that into if we're loading, we need to have the spinning guy spin in, right? So let's take a look at that. So the easy one first. The search bar's text should be equal to the state's subreddit. Easy, right?
I guess another use case for the converter guy is you could have a generic view that maybe has all of these things in it for their view model.
Right.
And maybe you have different screens or inputs that would then convert into the data.
You could turn the same state into different views.
Yeah.
Right. Like maybe there's a table, maybe a table cell represents something versus states. A full screen represents something. Or maybe there's different states that power the same view.
Yeah. Okay.
It's really and the cool thing is this pattern is loose enough. Like even like ReSwift is only a few hundred lines of code, and you can take it and turn it into like a lot of things. Are like, how do you want to do it? That's how you'll do it, right? So there's lots of power for you to decide what works for you. Like maybe you want to put API stuff inside of the store. Maybe that works for you for some reason. There's no like. Again, if you're into like the philosophy of how it works and like the core meaning of the way it's supposed to function. It may work against that, but if it's working for you, I don't know. I'm still learning about it.
Do what makes it work.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, you gotta get the app out.
So let's think about we have our error state. We have our a colon right there. Error state. Let's do that one first. So if we're in error, we want our status message to be the error. We want our status label not hidden, right? is hidden, I think, right? Oh, right.
No, just that.
So status label hidden equals false. The status view, who contains those spinners and everything, we want him not hidden.
Sure, yeah.
The activity indicator, we do want him hidden because we're not loading anything. We don't want anything spinning. Our posts, in this case, will be nothing. We've not loaded anything. And I think that's off 1, 2, 3, 4. That's all of them. Okay. So that's that one. We also could be loading, right? So if we're loading, we do want, so that there's no message. The status label is hidden. The status view is not hidden because the activity indicator is not hidden.
Yeah.
We still don't have any posts. We could also be loaded with some posts. And in this case, our status message is nil. Label's hidden, yes. The view is also hidden now. This guy's also hidden, and our posts are our posts. We have one more case, and that's the not asked. And again, that's where, like, when you first hop into the app, you haven't asked for it yet.
What does that look like?
So in that case, we are going to, this one to do self.posts. So message is nil, hidden is true, hidden is true, hidden is true. All right,
this
so
is great because you've got these different state types that you have to think about.
Right.
And it's very easy to, like, what does this look like when it's in an error
state?
So
the cool thing is you don't have to worry, like, there's, in the massive view controller model of things, it's easy to, like, if you go from loaded to loaded or not asked to load, if you didn't think about how one of those transitions happens, you're going to find it by QA finds bug because they did something weird and there it is.
Remember to
but with
hide
this, I mean, what's cool is if I forget to do something, I will compile time get an error that says, "Hey, you didn't handle something right." So it forces you before you write any code, you've got to think about what it means for these things to happen. And even if that state's not, like, maybe it's impossible to go from one of these states to the other state. You still got code there to handle. If some weird edge case happens, some kind of sane result will happen instead of just some weird unhandled case in the app. So this probably represents everything this view needs to do.
Yep.
So let's hop back to our view controller, and it's nice and simple. So the search bars, which I don't think I made an outlet for the search bar yet. Make one of those real quick. Search bar. And connect that.
Oh man, storyboards.
Yeah, Xamarin doesn't give you that.
I don't know.
Don't they have their own weird kind of storyboard editor?
They do, but it's garbage.
Well, maybe one day. All right, so search bar dot text equals state dot search bar text.
There you go. Pretty
easy,
simple.
right? Status view dot is hidden equals state dot status view hidden. Easy. Activity something or other dot is hidden equals state dot activity man hidden. Activity what is that other guy? I got the status label dot is hidden equals state dot status label hidden. Then the status label dot text. So you see how like dead freaking simple this is.
Well, that's what's great about this is because you've decoupled all this stuff, right? You only have to think about one aspect at a time of like what happens when I get articles. Well, I've just got to think about the actions or whatever on that and how I link that up, and then how does that convert into a view is another concept.
Right.
So you're breaking down each of these connections into their own little.
And I think it's more valuable than like a lot of the solutions for MVC are more of just taking problems and just putting them somewhere else hidden from each other.
Yeah.
This does separate them out, but it also makes them very independent of each other. You can think about what it means to receive a view model totally separate from what it means to like receive the post or receive an error for the posts. And again, it's all compile time checked. So like before you even press that build button, like, or I guess when you press the build button, you'll know, I forgot to handle if the posts fail. Yep. It's going to tell you. No, the one trick. So here was when I was initially kind of reserved about using this pattern. So there is this layer. So I'm calling this glue. We're turning unidirectional world into UIKit world.
Yep.
And it works fine for things where like the search bar, we can spam text property all we want all day. It's going to be fine. But then we have our friends like table view. Yeah. So if you have a table view that can be reordered or sections entered or sections deleted or sections whatever, table view doesn't just. You can't just be like, hey, here's a new thing, make that be. Yeah. You got to use that, it has those properties for like, it's got to match up. And when you move something, you better call reload down or reload section or insert section. So if you're in a very simple use case, like in our case where it's just all or nothing, we can do a very simple
Reload.
If post.count does not equal to state.post.count, then posts equals state.posts, and then table view reload data. So, but what if you wanted to do infinite scrolling, like you got to the bottom?
Yeah, so
well,
you're
now you've got
adding
to
to
say, okay, if there's more posts than I currently have, I need to figure out which index paths I need to add. I need to then append those to my data source as well. So one
Maybe
gets more
one
complicated.
was deleted in the
but
middle.
What if one was deleted in the middle, and then this one was
and
reordered?
then one was added at the
Sure.
same time? Then your count's not the.
So then it gets bad. So if in those cases, if you find yourself writing lots of weird glue code, people have generally solved those. So like our buddy did those. He wrote a thing that did that.
Talk about.
Instagram did a very, very cool least common subsequent solution to this problem, where you can say, given two data sources, let me know what inserted, what moved, what deleted, whatever. So some people are using that for this problem as well. And again, in our case, we're lucky because we can just reload data every
But that's things that you can look into if you start going down this path.
So if you end up in a problem, or the same thing, you'll get this with collection view. You'll get this with anything that like those transitionary
list
states.
of data that individual pieces can be modified and stuff like that.
Right. It gets fancier. But I think so. The pain that you suffer there is much less. Like the win you get is much bigger than the pain of making that glue parts work. Whereas I'd argue if some of those like reactive Cocoa and ReSwift, some of that pain is, I don't think it's you end up hurting. You're shooting yourself in the foot more than you are helping yourself. With this, the pain's there, but it's manageable. And again, in our case, we got lucky. So we've taken care of this. Yeah. Let's make the rest of our app work with that as well. So a few things we need to change. So right now, we load posts when somebody clicks the search button in the keyboard after typing some text, and we need to implement those actions. Mm-hmm. So when you type, we get back the search bar. Text change. Where is it?
Right there.
Bam. So when that happens, we need to say store.dispatch app action dot update subreddit, and that's going to be the search text. Bam. So now, as they're typing in the search bar, it's going to inform our store. Here's the new subreddit. Here's the new subreddit. Here's the new subreddit. And again, it seems to overkill at first, but you'll like if you need to do like for example validation as they type, or if you needed to like save something to a database as they type or whatever. Here's a cool chance for you to do that. When you click the search button, no longer do we. So we still want to get posts, but now we need to do those actions of letting the store know we're loading, and then also letting the store know we loaded. So we're going to take the get posts and we're going to turn it into an action creator. Ooh. So an action creator is a function that I'm going to mess this up unless I look at it. So let me look at it to make sure I don't tell you wrong. An action creator is a function that will accept a state and a store and return maybe an action. So we're going to make get post be a function that returns
maybe
an action, a store app state dot action creator. Okay. So again, all this work we're having to do up here with like reloading data and all this stuff.
That's all done in your.
This is all inside our view model now. So again, here's where we're going to start getting some benefits, right? Yep. So no longer do we have to all over the place worry about this kind of stuff. This is gone. So for the sake of not having a retain cycle on ourselves inside of this function, so what we're going to do is return a new function where it's I think it's the store and then the state. It might be state and the store.
Higher order functions.
Let me look. State and then store. State store. So this is what we're going to return now. I don't want to, so we own this API object. I don't want this function to also own us because it wants the API. So I'm just going to reference the API up here. And then we're going to take this man. We're going to move him into here. Okay. So no longer do we need to care about ourselves. We can get rid of this. No longer do we care about this. We can get rid of that. And we don't have to, like the view controller doesn't make decisions on what it means. Again, look, here we are where we're deciding this is hidden, this isn't hidden, we need to reload data here. Yeah. Bam. This is now gone. And again, that was where we had two places making these decisions. Now it's out of there, right? It's all inside the reducer and then in the state and in the view model. So don't need this anymore. What we do need to do is let the store know that we loaded some stuff. So store dot dispatch, and this is going to be an app action dot handle load post result
with the result.
do some formatting real quick. This is kind of hard to read. There we go. We also need to return. So what we'll do here is return app action dot load post, because again, this action creator is creating the action of loading posts. It's going to go load the post. Once it's done loading the post, it's going to let the store know. We can also be smart here and say, if the state dot, this is the weird syntax, if dot loading equals state dot posts, or loaded equals state dot posts, then return nil. So basically, if we're already loading or if we're already loaded, we don't need to do anything. So the action we're going to create is nothing, right?
Okay.
And I have messed something up. Okay, cool. So now instead of this get post us doing it, now because get post generates an action, we tell the store
to dispatch whatever action it returns.
So that could be nothing, right?
Yeah.
If we're just mashing that load button. We don't need to reload.
Yeah.
So we can also be smart about if we're already loading and they change the subreddit really, really, really fast and then search again. Now we have a bug. Yeah. So that's where we could be smarter and say, oh, if we're loading for this subreddit, now they're loading for that subreddit, we're not going to worry about it and just reload anyway.
Yeah.
So you can
get more complicated.
Right. You can get more complicated.
More fancy with it.
In our case, we're just going to make it so you can't mash that button. I think that's it. So let me just do a quick once over. That looks good. That looks good. That looks good. I think it's going to work.
And so you've done all these changes here without running this.
Or you're gonna.
Let's see how this goes.
Do this to me, see if it works first try.
With the idea being that the compilers helped you along most of it.
Right. So in theory, all the things that can go wrong, all the things that can happen, because we had to think about it, it should work. So let's go ahead and type a little subreddit, press enter. Our spinner showed up. Our post showed up. Beautiful.
Oh.
Let's do something wrong. So let's put in. This is going to fail, right?
Yep.
There's our error. I think that's all the different things. We can still tap on stuff, and that's going to work just fine too. So again, the cool thing is, if there were a bug, it's going to be in that reducer most likely.
Yeah.
Or maybe our glue had a problem. Mm-hmm. But again, like how cool is it to like everything like. If it's a view problem, it's gonna be right here. If it's a logic problem, it's gonna be in the reducer.
Yeah.
It's everything very much has a home, and everything feels right in that place. And it's very so another cool thing. So if I go to my state, if design comes back and says, hey, we want a default subreddit to be what's a good one?
Just all.
Oh yeah. Every time. So we can change again because the initial state is nil, so it's gonna be the.
And it's gonna go through all that logic that it would normally go if that subreddit had something in it, put in it, but you've done it manually.
So bam, there it is. So another cool, so like same things with like if I wanted to like put like some mock data in here, right, for posts, I could set the initial post to be .loaded and put in a post. This is not going to help me. Hang on. Help me out, buddy. It's not going to help me out. So let's put a post in here. What is it? Title. Test, and then I think permalink. Let's put test. Is that gonna work? I'm gonna mess up.
You've got a closed bracket. Oh wait, no. You need a closed paren before the bracket.
There we go. If I can type. There we go. Okay. So now, like, if I wanted to, again, for like maybe hard to reproduce like server error codes or hard to like, you've got bad data from the server right now. You just want to put some test data in there.
Well, and you're also getting into like again the testability of all this is you can just make your states or whatever that you want to test with.
Right. And so in this case, we're testing with the UI, but we very well could be running this just against like. Make sure that the view model is the right thing. Make sure the state's the right thing. So everything.
Make sure that the right actions are getting created and called out or whatever. Yeah.
How cool is that?
Yeah.
Isn't that nice?
Sweet, dude.
So again, I'm using ReSwift. They've got some really cool examples up on their website. If you're using JavaScript, I think Redux is what everyone's using. Mm-hmm. There's frameworks for this with every platform. But if you look at let's just peek really quick. If we look at the code inside of ReSwift. Here he is. Like action is, ignoring they have their little fancy thing that burps out stuff. Action is just protocol that basically doesn't do anything. They've got middleware, which basically is just a bunch of type aliases for functions that can subscribe to it. The reducer is just a function that takes an action in a state and returns a state. So everything's very
for the most part, they're just giving you a language to use basically around this.
So you don't need.
They're not really doing any too much logic to it, right?
You could sit down in an hour, read through all this code, and understand it and use it. The biggest struggle for me has just been like, how do I handle async things? How do I handle database things? What if I'm using core data? So there's lots of questions with like, given this other utility that needs to interact with it, what's the best way to do it? And a lot of the time, it's whatever works for you. And then you can look in the community and ask questions and work with people that have done it before. But it's been really cool to even talk to, usually when I'm on a project with the web guys, I don't have a lot of questions for them. But with this now, I can say like, how are you handling, how are you representing this state, or what are your actions for when you're in the account screen or whatever? And it's like,
and because it's abstracted from the way the view works specifically or whatever. There's that again, like you said, the similar language makes it easier to help out even between teams, more so than you would in the past.
It's awesome. So I'm very much drinking the Kool-Aid right now. We'll see how I'm feeling about this like in a year or two. But like right now, I feel like this is awesome. I'm really happy with this, and I'll try to get I think Cordux is what he calls it, right? Yeah. So he's using app coordinators and this pattern. He's got a thing called Cordux, and it's very neat. I'll try to get him on here sometime, and he can show us how the navigation works out. He's got navigation working with this. He has deep linking working with this,
and he's got the diffing.
Yes, because I think he does the diffing. I think he's using collection views and stuff to kind of swap back and forth. So there's the basic use case example. It's super, super fun. I think it's better than MVC, and it's easy to try out in just one part of your app. Like if you want to just try it in one little tiny section, give it a shot, you'll fall in love like I did maybe, and then go crazy and make the whole app do it.
Pretty cool, man. Thanks for showing us that.
All right, that's a big unidirectional 10th floor, Ben.